Hello, my sweet friends. Welcome back to another episode of Better Relationships After Baby. I am your host, Chelsea Skaggs, and today I am joined by Nicole Buckley, who is a licensed counselor who works primarily with the perinatal population. I met Nicole via Instagram. Sometimes like your best hype girls, your favorite people end up being from Instagram. And so I enjoyed meeting Nicole there. We've done a workshop that we got to talk back and forth a little bit through. And I just really appreciate her mission and her passion. I think that it aligns a lot. And I'm excited to have her here to just share some of her story and her perspective and leave you guys with, of course, some steps you can take, some mindset shifts that you can look into, and just give you some nuggets this week for how to keep investing in yourself and in your relationship, even in the really tiny gaps of your chaotic life. So welcome, Nicole.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here, Chelsea, and to officially meet you.
Yes. And okay, remind me, you said this is your first time recording. However, you have been told what?
Yeah, so I called into a podcast once, and the host said that I had a very good podcast voice. So,
Oh,
um, yeah, I guess I've also been told by some people that my voice can be calming and soothing.
awesome.
So, I
Very
guess I'm in the
good.
right field for that.
You are. You are. And I love popping your podcast bubble here
Thank you.
today and
Yeah.
having you.
First time. Yeah.
Yay, but probably not the last. So I'll just give a little pitch of if you would like to book Nicole on your podcast,
Thank you.
reach out to her at Raising Good Parents. But Nicole, tell me a little bit about your work, your life, how much you want to tell us about
Sure.
that, and
Yeah.
maybe even how those started to cross over a little bit, how your life has informed the mission you have now.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I am a perinatal therapist in Connecticut. And I got into this field actually a little bit through the back door. I was originally a school psychologist. So I was working in schools for a number of years with students, and I would inevitably always be working with parents too, but that was sort of on the side. And I remember thinking that I could really do a lot more good if I kind of stepped in before kids got
Mhm.
to school, right? Because we know that so much of early development is dependent on parents' well-being and things like that. So I really was starting to think along these lines of let me help the parents. And then I became a parent, which is probably where a lot of people's journey kind of begins
Yeah.
here, right, in this world. And I noticed that there just weren't a lot of supports out there for parents as a first time mom. And your whole world changes, overnight.
Mhm.
And so I just thought this is a track that makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. And I started to it was a long journey. I actually was still working in the schools as I was getting my licensure and doing my supervision hours and being a full time parent and all that good
Mhm.
stuff. So, but I went down this path. I actually came into this field right in the midst of the pandemic. And ironically enough, I didn't know as I was going down the path, but I was pregnant with my second child as well.
Wow.
And
Okay.
so when I started working with moms in pandemic times, I could relate very much to their experience and what it was like and all the shifts that had happened at that point in time in parenting.
Wow. Okay, we did not talk about this beforehand, but I'm going to share back with you, Nicole, that my work started out of college in behavioral health. So I worked in pediatric behavioral health, and then I went on to become a teacher. And
Oh, okay.
very similar to your experience, I felt I felt like I couldn't be a parent and work in a school at the same time. God bless those people who can do that because I could not. And I thought it starts at home. so much starts at home, and it starts with the care of the relationship and the individuals behind that. And similarly, when I became a mom, there were so many things that I was just shocked and angry about for what didn't exist, what wasn't talked about. It was just, it felt so lonely and like, wow, the world really dropped the ball on caring for us here.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
and I started my business in January of 2020, so right in the
Oh
height
my
of the
gosh.
pandemic, or right before it, so it's been a wild ride, but I love that we share, and that doesn't surprise me that we share that background of schools and working with the kids and seeing, okay, how can we go back a step further and really make a change in an even earlier portion of life.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you also started during the pandemic because that was such a transformational time. I feel like everybody's lives were just upturned, right? And
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
it's a big time for change and really, I think,
Yeah.
shaped our paths in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And, we still, I'm sure that you still see, and a lot of my clients right now are pandemic parents. And they became parents in this season that was so unknown, so wild.
I'm one of them.
And yeah, yeah, you did this. And I think something that's really interesting is how that maybe shaped perspectives of parenting, community, help, accepting and expecting those things. Is there anything you've seen that just really sticks out to you about pandemic parents and any
Yeah.
unique? I'm sure there's like some unique skills and things we celebrate, and also some unique challenges that they have faced.
Absolutely. Well, I have both experiences. I became a parent before the pandemic, and I really gravitated to a lot of community supports. I was doing yoga throughout my pregnancy. I was doing like yoga once the baby came. I had these support groups I would go to, lactation groups, and all of these things. And I had a lot of friends that had babies. So, in my first experience of becoming a mom, I had this huge support system surrounding me. And by my second child, during the middle of the pandemic, I had no support.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's what I really was seeing with my clients that were coming at that point in time, is that they just did not have that support system. And as you kind of alluded to, I think some of them didn't even realize what they were missing,
Yeah.
or that was like atypical. I would hear a lot from people that they were actually glad that they had no visitors in the hospital. Whereas for me, it like broke my heart,
Yeah.
because I knew what it was kind of like the first time, or what it was in my head supposed to be like. So I do think that really has shaped a lot of people's, you know, journey into parenthood, and what it's been like for people that maybe don't seek the support, don't know that they should have the support, maybe just have gotten so accustomed to not asking for help, or not reaching out to their community or their support systems.
Yeah. So I think we set out for this episode to be for everyone, and it still is, but maybe we speak really primarily to that pandemic parent who is figuring out now, okay, we are post pandemic. How do I do things like ask for help? Have someone be part of carrying the load. Why is this important for me? Um, what is it that makes support so important for moms?
Yeah, well, I'm sure you're well aware that the Surgeon General put out an advisory in the last year. Um, they found that, more than half of the US population is reporting feeling extremely overwhelmed and stressed in parenting. And I think there's so many reasons for that. Like we have already talked about, the support systems, this idea that we're really an individualistic society and we're trying to do all of it on our own. And there's also the components of, we have more information now, social media, which is a great thing. I mean, it connected us, and
Mhm.
there's so many benefits to getting that information, but also it can be overwhelming.
Oh, yeah.
But I also think a big piece is just, the culture we live in isn't really set up to support parents as much. And so it can be costly to find
Mm-hmm.
those supports, even
Mm-hmm.
if you are putting your child in daycare or hiring somebody to help around the house or with your childcare, it can be really financially difficult for a lot of families. So versus, at one time I think we had a little bit more community support or even more family support.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And something that I hear, and I would guess that you do too, is we sometimes compare ourselves to other generations. Like, well, if they could do it, or my
Hmm.
mom could do it, or my
Hmm.
grandma had 7 kids.
I hear that all the time.
Yeah. So we kind of hold ourselves to this standard that is also so outdated that it's apples to oranges.
Absolutely. I mean, the way that they were parenting back then was different. There were different expectations. There were different, again, supports. There was different information. There was just a lot of differences. I mean, we're 20, 30, sometimes 40 years out from when our parents were doing it. And so comparing ourselves to our parents' journey is definitely not helpful.
Right. Right. Yeah. And what is this doing, do you find, to mom's well-being, the impact that has on the home? I I think sometimes we kind of have to make this case for why not being super mom and asking for help is not only realistic but necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, according to Postpartum Support International, it's 1 in 5 moms will experience postpartum depression or anxiety. And it's 1 in 10 dads. So they're
Mhm.
not left out of this equation either. I always like to say, like, I'm sure it's a lot more than 1 in 10 dads. Like, who's checking
Yeah.
on the dads? Nobody's
Oh,
giving them
yeah.
screeners. So
No. Right.
it's really just whoever self reports it, I guess, or recognizes
Mhm.
it. But we do know that this is really difficult and a lot of people are struggling. And as we kind of alluded to earlier, the idea that our children are going to be impacted by our own mental
Mhm.
well-being, right? So if we're not okay at home, then our children's resilience and their just social emotional development, everything can be impacted if mom or dad are struggling to a large degree. So I think, to me, that's why it feels so important that we learn how to ask for help and that we learn when we need to ask for help. And I do think it's something that we're not accustomed to doing for a
Mhm.
wide variety of reasons. And it's something that doesn't come easily for us. So it's something we kind of have to learn at this portion of our lives.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that and that you hit on learning. Um, I find that we can get kind of stubborn as we get older, and maybe we think I should just know this, or this should just come natural, or I've been a human for 30, 40 years. Like, why do I have to learn a new skill? And I appreciate hearing you say learning, asking for help. Are there ways that you kind of educate people or talk about actually approaching that as a skill that you learn?
Yeah, so I think, you know, up until we have kids, we're operating in one way, right? We're kind of going through life, we're taking care of ourselves, maybe we're taking care of our house, maybe we're married, and whatever our system that we have in place up until we have kids works for that chapter of life. And then when we have kids, I always say we have to reevaluate, but we have to reevaluate at like every step of parenting, right? Because newborn is not the same as, infant, is not the same as toddler, is not the same as elementary. And so I do think that the whole thing is a learning process. But to your point, like, a lot of people kind of want to operate the way that they always have and the way that was serving them at certain times in their life. And we kind of have to step back and say, actually, like, this is a whole new chapter. You're a whole new person. Like, we need to kind of reevaluate and look at how we can change some of the things that we're doing.
Yeah, that's so good. And I see how much effort goes into making a change and how many people kind of stay stuck in a place that they don't like because that feels more comfortable than making a change. Um, but I think we both work to make a case for it is worth it, right? It is worth learning those skills. It is worth getting outside of your comfort zone. It's worth pushing yourself in a new way. Um, what do you see happening if someone continues to not ask for help and say, no, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. You know, that person that is really good at just like making it all look good on the surface. But I'm sure behind closed doors or in sessions, you hear the actual load and the heartache and the overwhelm. What's happening inside of that person that's always fine?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely all adds up to a lot of stress, a lot of feelings of burnout, a lot of overwhelm, sometimes depression, a lot of times anxiety is in the mix. And I will say that I think, from what I've seen in my experience working with this population, I think that there's three common barriers that are kind of
Mhm.
standing in the way of
Okay.
people asking for help. I think these are the things that are stopping people a lot of the times, right? Like you said, we have to learn a new way of doing things. But yeah, I think the barriers to me, the first one being that we're kind of socially conditioned to
Mm.
believe that we're supposed to do this alone, right? And you've already kind of mentioned the idea that we compare ourselves to our parents, or we compare ourselves to others. We have a belief system that may be in place, whether it's through some sort of gender norms or just what we've seen through media and through just growing up in the world, where we believe, especially as women, I'm sure, but men probably believe this too, that we have to take this on ourselves, right? We're supposed to do it all, like you said, super mom. And a lot of us did grow up at a time where we were told, like, you can be a working mom and you can have it all, you can do everything. And again, we're a very individualistic society.
Mhm.
So we are kind of out here trying to do everything, which is impossible. But when it becomes impossible, we feel like we're a failure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh, what a good distinction. Instead of accepting that doing everything is impossible, we tend to internalize, I am a failure.
Right. And I think a lot of times people have worked their whole lives, right? You work really hard, you get good grades, you go to all your practices, you excel in a sport, you work really
Yeah.
hard, you move up on the ladder. Parenting's not like that. And so when we're not seeing those kinds of tangible successes, but we feel like we're working really hard, again, it like feeds this notion of, oh my gosh, if this feels hard for me, or if I'm not seeing the outputs that I expect to see, I must be failing, right?
Mhm.
And so that, to me, that's the first barrier. The other barriers that I see, the second one is anxiety. And I think a lot of times, people tend to take things on because they're anxious. I think it's this idea of, if I can do this thing, then I can control for this variable.
Mhm.
And, I can also see how, in a lot of ways, these kind of bleed into each other. When the baby comes, who's the baby put on? Who's the first
Mhm.
person that's handed the baby, right? It's usually the woman.
Right.
Um, so again, this message is like, this is your responsibility. This is for you to figure out.
Yes.
And so a lot of times, as we're figuring it out, we tend to get into this place of need for control. And sometimes this is fed through, it's fed by intrusive thoughts or some sort of idea that if I do X, then Y will happen perfectly. You start to kind of gatekeep sometimes. And the more that we do that, the more that we're kind of taking it all on, the less that our partner has the opportunity to learn what we're learning, right? As we're on the job
Mhm.
learning. So maybe sometimes months and months go by and we've learned our baby and they're kind of on the sidelines. And so now our anxiety is like, oh, they actually don't know how to handle this. And they
Mhm.
don't really, because they haven't had the opportunity to learn it along the way, like we have a lot of the times. And I say women generally because I think, um, you know we tend to be, again, culturally conditioned to
Mhm.
think that we're supposed to be doing all these things. There's also the component of like Sometimes if we're breastfeeding, like a lot of it does fall on us, or even before baby comes, we're the ones growing the baby. So like it's already in our mindset that this is our job. Um,
Hmm.
and I think
Yeah.
that a lot of times that kind of we stand in the way of letting the other people in our world step in and help because we're afraid that they're going to get it wrong, right?
Right. Yes. Um, Before you get to number 3, I just have to plug again. If you are listening to this podcast right now, please connect with Nicole. She is at Raising Good Parents on Instagram, and I'm listening to her. And if you listen to this podcast, maybe you'll make the same connection. I'm like, oh my God, these are like, no one's ever said the things that I feel so strongly in the same words that I would use. Like, I just appreciate where you're coming from, Nicole, because I think we have so much alignment on how
Right.
we
Yes.
see these things. I love
Yes.
how you said on the job training, and that's a perfect way to put it. Like, moms get on the job kind of experience. And what I see, just to kind of add on to that a little bit, is that sometimes then dads, so we're, let's kind of put this in a heteronormative marriage lens here. Dads are always having a supervisor. They don't get the opportunity to have training without a supervisor. And mom is that supervisor. And it can be a little bit unfair. I mean, this was a big realization for me when I was like, well, how do I just know how to do everything? And I guess I'm just the one who can do all of this stuff. And, my partner is just worthless. And that wasn't true at all. It was that I made so many mistakes without someone watching me. And I learned that way, but my partner didn't get the luxury to learn because I was constantly watching over him.
Absolutely. And like I said, sometimes we actually will stand in the way of
Mm-hmm.
letting them have those
Yeah.
opportunities,
Yeah.
right? Because we
Yeah.
want to do it our way. Or we think that because we have learned
Mm-hmm.
what baby likes, we think like, okay, well, I'll just solve this
I'll
problem.
just do it.
I hear all the time from moms, it's just easier if I do it than explain
Yes.
it or than,
Okay. I like to say that word just is like a good flag. Like, maybe slow down and listen to yourself if you're using the word just. I'll just do it. It's just easier if I do it. And that, at least when I'm hearing it, kind of has that level of like resentment or
Mhm.
just a grr underneath of it that
Mhm.
I see as a flag of like, okay, stop, like listen to yourself again. Is that really what you want? Is that really what you mean? But that is so common. I think if you are someone listening and you say those things, okay, we see you, we love you. And also, there's some more like freedom and deep breaths available for you. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to get there.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up that resentment piece because I think that's really where a lot of this stuff ties in with what all the work you're doing, Chelsea, which I think is so phenomenal. I mean, a lot of clients come to me in the postpartum period and we're talking about motherhood and we're talking about babies or we're talking about what it's like to become a dad, but ultimately so much of it boils down to like the relationship and
Yeah.
how those things need to shift and
Yeah.
how do we shift those things. And I love that you're doing that work with
Well,
couples all the
thank
time.
you.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
I do think that when we don't let anybody else help, it does build up that resentment, right? Which actually kind of leads a little bit into the third barrier that I'm
Okay.
seeing. So I think the third barrier is that a lot of times when we finally do ask for help, it may not be well received. And I think there's a few reasons for that. I think sometimes it's because dad or the other partner has their own anxiety as well because they
Mm-hmm.
don't feel competent,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because maybe the primary caregiver has been doing this for 6 months and this other person has never done it and they just don't believe that they are competent to do it. And so I think that there's a little bit of a pushback sometimes because of that. I think sometimes it could be also because they've seen you do this, right, for 6 months or however long. Like
Yeah,
they've seen you
right.
do this every night. You put baby to bed. Why do I need to step in? I'm enjoying my time over here doing my thing, right? So it's hard because they're not necessarily motivated to step in if you've always been doing it. And then I think that resentment piece, by the time, if we are conditioned to believe we shouldn't ask for help and we need to take it all on and we need to do everything ourselves, by the time that we are asking for help, I think it's often because we're like at our breaking point,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we're like,
Mm-hmm.
we're ready to snap. Like we are not coming from a really good place as we're asking for help. We're coming from that frustration space, and that resentment comes through. And I think so. What will happen often that I see is that the other partner will maybe respond in a way that's defensive or respond in a way that's meant to kind of shut that down. Maybe there's some irritability or even some yelling at times. And so the person asking for help now, it reinforces this idea of like, I can't ask for help. Right.
Yes.
So that's like learned on both ends. And then that person stops asking for help. And the person that was asked for help learns, if I respond in this way, I won't be asked, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the person that was asking for help learns it's not safe to ask for help. So I do hear that a lot too. I hear like, oh, I have asked for help, but that didn't go well.
Yeah.
And so I think that becomes a pattern that gets perpetuated a lot in relationships as well.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about addressing that in a better way. If somebody is listening and either they have not had a good experience asking for help, or maybe they're just now like, okay, I don't want to get to my breaking point. I want to be more intentional about this. How do you even go about starting this skill, this learned skill of asking for help and stepping into that place?
Yeah. So, I mean, I always like to kind of think about which barrier are we dealing with. And a lot of times it's all three, or it's some mix of a bunch of them. But I guess if it's the first barrier, if the thing that's holding us back from asking for help is the belief that we're not supposed to, then we really need to reflect on, where's that belief coming from? Where have we heard that? Where have we seen that? Is that true to our own personal values? And then we start to have these conversations. And sometimes it's even helpful for couples to have these conversations together. What were the gender norms that you saw growing up? What were the ones I saw growing up? To the point of comparing to past generations. If I, as a mom, am comparing myself to my stay-at-home mom when I was growing up, but I'm a working mom, that's like you said, apples to oranges, right? It's not a
Mhm.
fair comparison. And so it may come down to adjusting our expectations of ourselves and recognizing how unrealistic a lot of those expectations have been. Um, when it comes down to that anxiety space and the gatekeeping and just like, I'll
Mhm.
do it because it's easier, because we want that control or we want it to go a certain way. I do think that, it can be really helpful again to adjust our expectations. So in some cases, I think we're stopped from asking for help because we don't want it done the wrong way. But there's a lot of instances where, there is no right or wrong way, or like different isn't, I always say different isn't wrong.
Right.
A really good example is like my husband gets my 4-year-old daughter dressed every morning. And is it always like the cutest outfit, like what I would put her in? Probably not. But like at the end of the day, I have to like recognize that was really helpful for me in
Mhm.
my morning routine. Is she clothed? Is she safe? Is she healthy? Like, it's all good, right? I don't need to like nitpick what she's wearing, even if it's not what I would have chosen.
Yeah.
So I think adjusting our expectations and letting go a little bit there. But I do think sometimes there are situations that, really do cause more anxiety, that are at like higher level than that, such as like, I don't know, bath time, for instance, and it does feel a little bit more scary to like relinquish control and let somebody who's never done bath time do bath time with an infant. And so to that, I always kind of suggest doing what I like to call like an internship. So like it is kind of like this on the job training, like you're learning
Mhm.
alongside the person who's been doing it. I don't think anybody would ever like step out of a job that they've been doing for 6 months and just leave it to somebody who's never done the job, right?
Yeah.
You'd have some
Yes.
sort of a training, or like, as a teacher, you would have had a student teacher,
Mhm.
or somebody, you'd have at least sub plans.
Right.
so so you wouldn't just hand that over. So if it is
Yeah.
sort of that higher level of concern for you, then maybe having some time where you guys are together doing the thing. And I would even recommend for new parents who, are just starting out on their
Mm.
parenting journey, start off that way.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, like give the baby the bath together every night. Put the baby to bed, even if one of them is breastfeeding, or whatever, and there's a reason that it feels more on one end than the other, you can still be alongside for all the other pieces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That is a brilliant tip, especially for those having their first child together. Like, do things together as much as possible. And that will really help it to become, both of you independently being able to do a lot of the tasks. And that would probably set the relationship up for less resentment, less overwhelm, the things that we hope for our clients in our communities. In kind of bringing this full circle here, what connections do you see as a passionate person, as a mom yourself, as a therapist, between asking for help and realistic self-care?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that it's really important to make sure that we're doing things in our day to day that are benefiting ourselves, right? So we need to make sure that we're asking for help, setting boundaries, really like giving ourselves grace, adjusting expectations, all of those things I consider self care.
Mm-hmm.
Working on our relationship dynamics. So, when it comes to that pattern that we spoke about where, um, we become afraid to ask for help. I think some of the things that we can do to work around that is we can ask for help more frequently, right? Before we get to the point of that frustration space where it comes off as irritable or
Mm-hmm.
resentful. I think that's another reason why asking for help is so
Yes.
important. And I think we can also build our tolerance for the other person's emotions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's okay if that person feels frustrated by the ask, but we're not going to let that stop us. We're not going to let that scare us away from asking in the future. So I'm really glad you asked the question about the self care, because I think a lot of times, as a mom, you hear like, oh, practice self care. And it feels like just one more thing we have to do. It's like, no,
Yes.
like I am caring for everybody. Like I don't need to take on one more thing.
Right. Or like, am I not a good mom if I don't have my nails done all the time, or I
Right.
didn't get a massage this month? Oh gosh, it's another thing on my to-do list.
But Chelsea, I got my nails done 2 days ago, and let me tell you, it didn't do anything to improve like the day-to-day functioning of my life. Like it was nice in
Okay.
the moment, but then you
Yes.
come back to like your normal grind, and
Mm-hmm.
it's very short term, that type of self-care,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I hear you saying something that I highly resonate with, which is improving these systems and interactions, and just the energy in your home is a maybe radical form of self-care.
Absolutely. Yes. I think it's that idea of like, you don't want to have a life that you need to vacation from. Vacation's great, right?
Mhm.
But at some point you come back and then you just pick up
Yep.
your life where you left it off. So when we're struggling in these ways of burnout and stress, anxiety, depression, going on vacation will make us feel good for a week or however long we're away, but we need to come back to that space at some point. And so I think, to me, self-care really exists in that space of like, how can we make changes? How can we tweak the way we're doing things? How can we reevaluate, my favorite word? And I think that really comes down to these other things, like seeking out the supports, setting the boundaries, and really being gentle on ourselves.
Yeah. I am thrilled that you said those things. And I hope that everyone takes those to heart. This episode is releasing on the 25th of March. And I think you said you are doing a workshop. Is that
Yeah.
correct? On self-care?
Yes, so I'm going to be doing a virtual workshop, so that way it'll be open to everyone.
Awesome.
And we're going to be talking about some of these things and
Okay.
how to make these changes in our day-to-day lives that are going to hopefully help us long term.
Yeah. Awesome. If someone wants to go through that journey with you,
Yeah.
where would they look for information?
Sure. So on my website, which is just simply Nicole Buckley LPC.
Perfect.
.com.
I'll link that in the show
Thank
notes.
you. You can go onto my website and there will be a space to register for the workshop there.
Yay.
Or I will also link it through my Instagram handle at Raising Good
Okay.
Parents.
Okay. Wonderful. Before I let you go, I wonder if you could share, obviously not with too much detail, but have you seen moms come out of this place of overwhelm and despair and use asking for help to improve their life? And
Absolutely.
what has that looked like? What has that sounded like?
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen it. I will say it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
It's definitely a journey.
Yeah.
But I have seen people that have really struggled to um, assert their needs, become more comfortable in that space. I have heard feedback from people that this idea that I give them of, really trying to build that tolerance for their partner's reaction has been helpful because it takes away the power sometimes of that, reaction that would historically have shut them down.
Mhm.
And if they say things to themselves or to their partner, like, you're allowed to feel mad and like this is still something I need. I've heard that that has been really helpful. And I think that the idea of doing the like side by side, the
Yeah.
internship, as I call it, side by
Yeah.
side, I think that has seen a lot of success too, because if we're really worried about our partner's ability to do these things, doing them side by side is a really nice step in the direction of letting go. And I think it's really, really important to really have involvement from all ends, because there's going to be some point in the future where you are going to step away. You're not going to be able to oversee
Mhm.
everything all the time. And so I think that's what I like to see, is like once we get to a place where it becomes more comfortable to ask for help, more comfortable to step away, that's when I see moms really thriving.
Yeah.
It's like they can go
Yeah.
out with their friends now. They can go to,
Mhm.
a yoga class or, whatever. They can even sometimes go away for a night or two.
Yeah.
So I think that that's really the goal here, is like get us to a place where we can do the things that feed our soul again, where we can do the things that make us feel like maybe how we felt before we had baby.
Yes.
And, come back to that space with ourselves for a little bit, because we don't have to take everything on.
Literally taking notes. Your insight and your gentle voice go very well together.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that you haven't shared or you just feel like you want people to hear and know and respond to?
No, I think it's a journey. And like I
Yeah.
always say, we have to keep reevaluating, we have to keep tweaking things, we have to keep growing. None of us come into this space knowing how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
As I heard someone say recently, like, we don't get to test drive motherhood or
Mm,
fatherhood. Like, it's all
yeah.
new. And so give yourself grace, give your partner grace. I think seek the supports, and unfortunately it's a lot of work. It's like we have to do the work,
Yep.
but it's really worthwhile in the end.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time and this
Thank
space and your
you.
wisdom
Thank you,
with us.
Chelsea.
Yes. And I can't wait to see what you come up with next. And I might even check out that self care workshop for myself because,
Awesome.
even
Yeah.
those of us doing the work need spaces to do the work in ourselves also.
Absolutely. Yeah, I hope to see you there.
Yay. Okay. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, I would be so grateful if you take a minute to help spread the word. As a small business owner, shares and reviews go a long way. So share this episode with a friend, share it on your social media, and please leave a review if you haven't done so. This helps these messages get to more mamas, and you guys, that's how we change the world.